Thanks, Min, and welcome everybody, and to our first in a long time meeting with everybody. It's great to see. I think we did one of those a year and a half ago, and then we're back to virtual after that. So it's good to see everybody. We had, and we're just working on some of the technology, so we're hoping to get it all working tonight. But we're still playing with some of it, so see how it goes. So moved by Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Dirksen, and Councilor Town Manager resumes open council. Reporting that a closed, moved by Deputy Mayor Church, second by Councilor Elliott. The council receives the report of the closed session regarding proposed or pending disposition of land, and the further the council approves the confidential direction given to staff. Moved by Councilor Anderson, second by Councilor Judson. That the minutes of May 17th, 2022 closed session, June 7th, 2022 regular council meeting be approved. Additional items, additional items. We cannot fall.
I don't.
I was going to say, are you not going to talk about the blanks?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Moved by Deputy Mayor Church. Second by Councilor Elliott. Council Town Manager meeting of favor. Passed. Allocations, question period. Question period. Correspondence. Moved by Councilor Dirksen, second by Councilor Anderson. Council Town Manager receives correspondence with information. I just want to make one mention, the letter from Dale, we've already responded. I think it was a good response. Anybody else? Favor? Carried. Development planning committee. Moved by Councilor Gus, second by Deputy Mayor Church. The council receives economic development planning meeting minutes of June 9th. Information presented recommendation 15. Who is doing this one?
So Linda is unavailable
Yeah.
tonight.
Has anybody got any? I could probably talk to us. This is Bill. Is he ready to go? Moved by Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Dirksen. The council receives the Triton Engineers May 22nd, 2022 report. More houses, homes for everyone in Minto, following action be approved. And this is brought and Councilor Anderson had asked for us to get a report, and the staff already working on a report. I believe there's a county report in there as well. So this is our opportunity to really look at Bill on. You know, I think the Terry government had an idea that this would speed things up, and we pointed out a few things in it, but Bill will go through it. Sometimes the wisdom at the top doesn't understand where people trenches have to be done. So make sure you ask any questions you have on this. Talk, I'm sure. It isn't where I'll send it yet.
It
It is where I'll send it. Yeah.
It's just phased in with
Phased in, and again, they don't have all the regulations.
They're actually, I'll just let Bill
I'll let
talk to it.
Bill,
I
yeah.
can answer the questions after.
Okay, go ahead, Bill. All right,
Hello.
there he is. How's Texas?
It's hot,
It's hot here,
really
Bill.
hot. But otherwise good. I hear you're in a bit of a heat wave.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize the council chambers. It looks wonderful. So you did a nice job. It's a pleasure to be here again. And thank you for the chance to speak with you. And I really appreciate the opportunity to work with your staff on this report on housing supply in Ontario and in Minto. It's an issue near and dear to my heart, and it's something that when I was working for you, I think we preached about flexibility and so forth, and we've been talking to the county about that for years, and I'm not saying that that's why we are in an issue right now. I think the issue is a lot bigger than even what we may think it is, but it's just a pleasure to report to council on it. I think all of you, like myself, have family members, younger people who want to move into the market, buy a home, and it just seems like that's an impossible task. So what the report covers is 3 things that were on your correspondence. I think last time I appeared before you, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing Task Force that looked at housing supply. There was a Township of Creme, I don't know how to say that, resolution regarding Bill 109. And then there was a county summary of phase 2 land needs assessment. 3 of those, I think Councillor Anderson picked up and asked for a report on it, and thought that there were some things in there that were worth discussing. And I really believe it's a good thing that you did that, and I think it's a pleasure to present that to you. So I'll just go through the 3 things briefly. The task force report, I'll really cut to the chase quickly on it. They're proposing that the need in Ontario right now is to create 1.5 million new homes in the next 10 years. They've seen incomes growing 38% in the last 10 years, whereas housing prices have grown 180%. So that's why, you know, my sons or your grandkids or your kids are looking at the market and saying, how in the heck am I ever going to get into that? The housing market, even in the community where I live, because traditionally small towns were where, you know, at least we had affordable housing. And so the task force is set out to look at all ideas for trying to increase housing supply to reach that 1.5 million homes in 10 years. So they talk about infilling and flexible zoning and secondary units. And they talk about the legislation and how big it's got. And I thought there was a nice graphic, and I put that in the report, about the size of the Planning Act and the size of provincial policy documents. And as someone who saw that throughout my career in municipal work, it's just gone from something that was manageable to something that I just can't believe the complexity of the Planning Act right now and the new things that have been added over the years. And we talk a little bit about that in the report. But the task force not only identified that, they identified things like 4 units as of right, for example, on one property. So there would no longer be single family zoning. Anyone would be allowed to have 4 units on their property. Now, I'm not sure how that would work. And again, they're just throwing these ideas out for discussion. And that's what we've kind of done at working with your staff to bring forward some thoughts. So a couple other interesting ones in the task force, they talk about getting rid of development charges and instead upping the infrastructure payments to municipalities, so that, for example, the average house price is affected by development charges to the tune of about 135,000 across Ontario. Now, Minto, that's only 17,000, but so development charges are a good chunk of what's paid, and they're talking about eliminating those in favor of infrastructure grants that allow municipalities to plan their infrastructure. They talk about the impact of skilled trades not being available and how that affects housing prices. They talk about streamlining and federal programs. So they've gone all over the specter of things that could be done. They haven't prioritized their recommendations. And I think it was a good thing for council to have a good look at that report and for us to bring forward some thoughts on it. So that's what the task force did. As far as Bill 109, there's a very good memo from the county on the specific details of the changes that impact on planning process. And so I think that's attached in your agenda, and that was very well done. I think Curtis did that, and I think you can rely on that, and they're giving you good advice, and I think your staff has been to some training. But contrary to, I think, what the Housing Task Force is saying, I feel like when I got into looking at Bill 109, it's counterintuitive. It added more regulation. It added the opportunity for the province to require you to report on things. It does things like, if certain applications for rezoning or site plan approval aren't processed in their prescribed times, then the municipality is bound to refund application fees. And my experience is that developers don't really care much about the fees. They want their development approved. I think if they are given an assurance that there's progress being made on their application, and I know Minto staff does a great deal on pre-consultation, and the county, that developers have a good sense of where things are going. So the application fees are typically well spent in my mind, but they have gone up quite a bit since even when I was working. So they're very, very large now. So it's a big investment for a developer if they need to change the planning act approvals in some fashion. The other thing, there's a bylaw on to give the director of building and planning authority to approve site plans. Again, they see that as a means of speeding things up. I think your staff has done a great job on bringing things to you in a timely way, and you're not in the habit of delaying things. I think this council and the councils I've worked with have always been on the other side of things, wanting to make things happen. So I think this legislation is directed at other municipalities who seem to maybe drag their feet on some of these things for whatever reason. There's also stuff about scaling back on studies that are allowed during the site plan process, and a pretty big section on the minister taking authority to approve a planning application like a rezoning, and doing that kind of outside provincial policy and outside some of the standard procedures that you have to follow, so that a council can ask the minister to do a zoning order to approve something that council may not be able to approve because of objections or other things that are delaying it. And obviously it had to be something that council believes has merit, but I think this is a relatively untried process. Never been entirely comfortable with the province stepping in a situation like that, but they do have that in there, and the minister has considerable authority if the municipality finds itself in a delay for something that is very important to get through. As far as the phase 2 county MCR housing initiatives, the good thing about that is they put forward some housing targets for Minto, and I think you've heard me talk about 66 units per year for the next 30 years. That's the target that Minto needs to meet to fit in with the county planning process, and because the county is going from the 9th fastest growing municipality in the Greater Golden Horse to the 3rd. So there's going to be considerable development projected to come there, and so 66 units per year in Minto is what they see you contributing to the housing need. If you look at the housing task force projection of 1.5 million housing units per year, Minto's share would be 100 units per year. So they're saying that the demand out there is really 100 units per year for the next 10 years. So you would have to, in order to meet the task force goals, Minto would have to outperform even its 66 units per year. And I think that may have been a possibility in these recent years, but how sustainable that is, and how, what capacity there is for your staff to process growth and for the land and for the infrastructure and so forth, that remains to be seen. Also in the county MCR, they talked about taking your future development zonings and putting them into mixed use, and they're going to come back and talk to you about that. And I think that's a good thing. That would advance these lands a little bit further down the process towards being developed. They are talking about allowing for highway commercial areas to change to mixed use, and they have a process to convert surplus commercial land to mixed use. So the county is definitely thinking about this in their MCR. Also, you've asked them to think about it by the resolutions you've sent them over the many months that we've been reporting to them on this. And I know there's another meeting coming up in July. But all the resolutions that council has passed forward have always been about maintaining a reasonable supply and choice and making sure there's opportunity out there. And it's a personal feeling, and I don't know if the county planners that are doing the MCR could echo it, but it seems that there's a frustration with the lack of flexibility in that MCR process. And I think it's bearing out in the fact that most Ontario municipalities will not meet the July deadline. I don't know if you've heard any word on that, whether they're going to extend it, but one of the options may be that if the province is going to extend it, then they take to heart the idea of streamlining and ask all the Ontario municipalities to look at ways of streamlining. I don't know. That's one of the ideas that we've thrown in with the staff for you to consider. Just a quick update on OPA 119. That's part of the county review. It MCR. It implements the technical urban and rural classifications in the county. And Minto had a concern about rural settlement areas and the ability to infill and round out. And the county has now adopted that amendment, and they have put in wording about rural clusters, and they're going to talk a little bit about that in the next phase. So the idea of rounding out a rural settlement or a rural cluster in secondary ag areas is still on the table, and those opportunities are still there, and the county's going to look at them. So I think that's a good thing, because you were one of the ones that commented on that and felt like that needed to remain as an option. So just to finish my presentation, depending on which financial source you're looking at, there's been a 20 to 35% drop in housing prices in the market in the last 2 months, and rates have increased from 1.5 to 5. I remember when I bought my first house in 1989, I was happy to be at 9. And some of you had homes in the 80s were dancing around 20%. So I think mortgage rate increases are going to naturally calm the market. I think there's a correction in it, and there's lots of literature out there that's talking about this could be a deeper decline than anyone imagines. But if there are houses in Minto, and I've heard anecdotally there is, going for $1 million, and there's a 35% drop, there's still 750,000, and that's still not particularly affordable, frankly. But I'm not suggesting we want to see a housing crash, because I think it's important that the town continue to make progress on their unit creation, because even, we've seen it, even though things dip and drop, the demand gets held back, and then it returns almost immediately as economic conditions improve. So this is dramatically driven by market. The idea of the 18 proposals that we made to council are to get you to think about it. The interim CAOs and your director of planning and building, we talked at length about how would we present these 18 ideas, because we don't want it to be unruly, but we wanted to get the ideas out there. And so I can go through them if you want. I know there were questions from some of the councillors on some specifics of them. The idea would be that you think about them, that you discuss them with staff, and give them some direction of a time when you want them to bring back a report. Things are changing in the market, but I wouldn't recommend that you just let that happen naturally. I think some of these things, like streamlining and reducing legislation and having flexibility to change your settlement area boundaries outside the county MCR process, things like that are really important to have a discussion on and to give feedback to the province on, because even if things do turn down, and I hope it's not a drastic turn down, then you can prepare yourself, and the county and the province can prepare themselves for when things come back. And it would be nice to have some streamlining done in advance. So the recommendation that's before you is to appoint your director to do the approvals that he's outlined in there. And my understanding is he's taken legal advice on that bylaw. There's certain obligations on the treasurer to post development charges on the website, and they talked about a regulation around that. I'm sure the treasurer and the deputy treasurer, interim CAO, are well aware of that, and will monitor that. And then we're asking that you think about those 18 ideas and ask the county in their phase 3 to maybe look at the housing affordability task force ideas and some of the ideas you have, and bring forward one of their policy reports on housing need and supply. And the final thing is to support in principle the township of Crame resolution. I'm not entirely sure you need to support the details of it, but certainly in principle, I think heading towards less legislation is going to be a big way of helping this, not increasing legislation. So that's my report, and thank you for the opportunity, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Bill. I'm going to open up for questions. There's a lot in those two reports. Ron and Jean.
Okay, a couple things, Bill, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, we were talking about 100 or 66 units a year and probably more extent to 100. So we're gonna outdo that 1 year for sure. Now, I assume that we'll run out of land and things will slow down. What happens then? Are we expected to, if we do 500 units a year, and then next year, do we expect again to have another 66, or do we expect to have again 100, or what happens there?
The question, I think, is what happens if you do the 500 or 100 units a year and then run out of land? Is that the question?
Yeah, sort of thing, and what's the penalty if we don't meet the 66 units, or we run out of places to put them? What happens there?
So I don't think there'll really be a penalty. I think what will happen based on the projections the county made is that there just won't be the supply that is needed to meet your demand. So my feeling is the market will take care of that. And it's likely that over the 30-year period they're projecting it, based on the need that's being expressed out there, that you'll exceed those requirements. And the worry is that you'll run out of land in a time when you're between county comprehensive reviews. So you may be 5 years away and you won't be able to expand your settlement boundaries. And right now that process is very regimented. You can't increase a settlement boundary without a county set through the municipal comprehensive review. Now you did it in Minto because you traded lands here and there there are some special circumstances, but if you run out of land midway through, you're waiting until the next county comprehensive review.
For sure. And there's no way we can get into that review?
I think one of the recommendations is that you ask the county and the province to look at that, and maybe settlement areas could be like, that's a fairly recent thing. Like not too long ago when I was still working for you, you could change your settlement boundaries in a slightly different way. I don't even remember the exact date, but I mean, municipalities were able to function for years without the MCR process. So, yeah.
I have a second question, and then I'm done. You were talking about development charges. I don't understand how we would recover those. Is there a grant system that you're suggesting that we do development charges to prepare for the future? So how does that prepare us for the future if we lose those?
Right. I guess what they're arguing in that is that the concept of having developers pay for future infrastructure needs is a fairly loose one. And you've had to do development charges studies and reports, and I know the treasurer's brought them forward, and you hire a consultant and so forth. And they're saying, rather than doing that, just have the province increase its infrastructure grant so that infrastructure is paid for by the province and by the municipality. And you can use that money to plan for what you need as far as infrastructure. So they're sort of trying to eliminate that whole system. And frankly, the development charges system is relatively new too to a person like me. I mean, it goes back 20 years, but we used to function without development charges. So I guess this is a time when housing prices are $1 million in some places where they never have been like that. I think you need to start thinking about drastic changes. So that's one of them. They give you a grant instead of development charges, and you could plan on your own for infrastructure, and developers wouldn't have to put that on the price of the houses. Hello?
Yeah, so how do we assume, how do we know how much money we'll need? We gotta assess what we need to build in the future, and we'll get that assessed grant budgeted year to year, or is that going to be one payment?
Yeah, so they don't really address the mechanisms, but how I see it would work is that you do exactly like that. And I think Triton has done some work for you on projecting your infrastructure needs and the costs and where the pressures are. And you would, or you could just, so you could send that study to them, require all municipalities to submit their development charges study, and the province could just replace it with a grant. I mean, these are all off the top dramatic things. So I'm not saying that it would be easy, and I'm pretty sure there'd be a lot of resistance, particularly at the bureaucratic level of the province, but that's the concept that task force is bringing forward to you. And they're thinking outside the box, and they're being dramatic. And frankly, as an old timer, I can see it. I remember a world where we didn't have those things. And, you know, I think there's been good changes made to the Planning Act, but not all of them have really added value to the process.
And I just warn you, Ron, in the sense that the last time they did something like that, they decided that they would just subsidize the difference between farm taxes. Where are we today with it? So, you know, it worked for a while. I'd be a little concerned that governments, if they change and say, oh, well, that grant is going to be for this year, we're not going to give you that. So, you know, at least we have control over what we do here. I'd want to really see some safeguards in there if they do that, because as you know, Triton's done this. We've done the study. We're talking about where we need to be for water and sewer and everything else going for the next 10 years. That study's already there. They know that cost is enormous. Without development charge, could get there. Now, if the government came along and said, yeah, well, just take that, and we'll give you that $100-some million that you're going to need. Great. But I don't see that happening. So it's a wishful thought. It's good for election year.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it was. Gene, go ahead.
Hi, Bill. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Councillor Anderson.
So my first question is, what exactly does as of right mean?
Basically, they would be saying, it doesn't matter what kind of zoning bylaw the municipality has. As of right, every property in Ontario would be allowed 4 units. Maybe it would be every property in an urban area that has full sewer and water, but you'd be entitled to 4 units. So you wouldn't be scrapping over whether a semi can be built or an apartment could go in. Now, frankly, the county second housing unit policies that Minto has implemented and has done a good job implementing, they take care of a lot of that. And the town zoning bylaw has already been changed. So I think, you know, Terry Kuipers and others on the staff have done that, but that's what as of right means. Basically, every lot in Ontario, in theory, could have 4 units and no bylaw could be prevented to pass it. Or prevent it, sorry.
Which is kind of an interesting concept. Like that task force was some pretty interesting reading. If you followed everything in that task force, there's no parking spaces, there's no this, there's no that, there's no.
Yes.
Not his hand up.
So just further to Bill's point, it would mean that every property could have 4 units, but it doesn't prevent us from regulating it. So we need, you know, 2 parking spaces per unit, whatever. If you can't provide it, you can't have the 4 units. So it's not like it's carte blanche, everyone can do it. There's still regulations to control where it can and can't go.
Okay, so because I read this as of right, and I'm going, that's what sounds like, you can do whatever you like, but you still have to have sewer capacity and water capacity and parking. Like the task force said, don't worry about parking spaces. One, you can't go parking now.
So
If you don't provide parking spaces for these 4 units, they levitate the cars.
and that was geared to areas right close to mass transit systems.
Right.
So it would never apply to here. It would never function here for one. But yeah, it's again, these are all proposals that we're throwing out there. It's not anything that's implemented.
Right, so what is the process? They've done this task force, I get it, it's very dramatic, they want to increase housing. I understand that, we have this dynamic. I'm kind of curious about how we got to this point where we need so much housing. I know we've got lots of immigration, but like, there's more people living with their parents than there ever has been in the past, and yet there's this enormous drive for housing. And in small communities, growth is good to a point. What about the forefathers that built these villages or towns as small, peaceful, quiet towns that are now gonna have legislation pushed down their throat that says, we can have 4 homes on every lot? And I'd like to know your opinion of the 430 square foot little house. Because we've had many discussions about little houses, and I think that's littler than any house we've talked about.
So in our accessory unit bylaw, we allow for units down to 538 square feet.
So that's still pretty small too.
Pretty small. We did crunch numbers that you could build a code compliant house down to 190 square feet.
Really?
You're
That's,
talking, yeah, and it's an interesting house that would function like horribly. But all the rooms would be combined except for the washroom.
Whoa.
And you're talking, the sink would actually be in the shower.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough room for both. You'd have a small little toilet, but the bedroom, living room, kitchen is the other, like,
My sister lived in an apartment like that in downtown Toronto. When she went to bed, she had to go to bed because she had to open up the bed and the room disappeared. And the kitchen sink was adjacent to the, yeah.
430, I don't think is an unrealistic number to have a comfortable
Okay.
house. It's small, but
Well,
It's
it's
doable.
like, what is it's just such a unique situation we're finding ourselves in, and I'm just sort of going, where do you cross the boundary between what is comfortable for, and meeting our seniors' needs? Because they created these towns, and now they can't afford to move down into bungalow type safe housing for themselves, because it's twice the cost of the house that is appreciated 1,000 times since they bought it. But like, it's a really untenable situation for people to live in, and they're going, yeah, we gotta have houses. Well, the biggest push for housing in our area, from what I can see, is our proximity to larger centers, and people don't want to go any further north. It's not necessarily because they want to come to Minto because it's the best place to live, although it is. But that's not the driver for a lot of these people, I don't think, and I find that's really uncomfortable for us to sort of deal with this. And I get that, they want to take the politicians out of this mix, so we're not interfering in what's the best practice to build more houses, but is it what's best for your community?
and it's kind of funny, your points, Gene. It's almost, you're talking two ways. We want the small town feel, which is the big large
Mhm.
lots and large houses. But we can't afford to buy those big large houses with the people that are here. So it's a lovely catch-22.
It really is, it's quite a dilemma. Okay, that's all I've got, Bill, for right now, other than the other ones that I sent you earlier, so.
Thank you. It's a work in progress, and there's no big solution here. I mean, there's lots of things in the task force, I totally agree with Dean, but there's a lot of things. And we've done some good things. And I forget, Terry, how many, we've got quite a few of the smaller units going in the back.
Since we implemented the accessory units, would 20 be fair to say?
Which is good, and what these units are either for maybe a parent to live in, or they're gonna be extra revenue, so people can afford the price. So I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to get ahead of the curve. And like our next item is a great subdivision that we're looking at, and you can see that the change in that subdivision. I bet you a few years back, we were all saying family houses.
Right.
But we know that that's not what we need at the moment, and this subdivision, just it shows you where we're going, right? So I think we're trying to get there. There's gonna be some pushback here with the economy, but this is gonna be a funny recession. And I was one of the people that 20% interest rates. I went from 10 to 20, and I thought 10 was a pretty good rate, and I went to 20 in my 5-year renewal. But, we got through it. And it's part of adjusting and doing what you're doing. But one of the things about this recession is we're gonna see high employment. So we're not, other recessions tend to be high unemployment, but you have a double whammy. We don't have enough people working right now. We're just talking about some stuff here, like some of our people can't get workers. So, it's not gonna be a case of people won't have a job. They'll have to figure out inflation, because inflation's gonna cost everybody that pumps gas and all that. But it comes down to housing too, and you're gonna get ups and downs in housing, and Bill was right when he's talked about if you look at from May to May, I think housing is only up around 11%. But you look from January, February, all of a sudden there was this big rush, everybody was selling houses, people had 5% off overnight. They went to 35. So you're coming down from a really high peak, should have been there, it was artificial, and now you're gonna see it more level. So I I think we're gonna still be all right, but we still have to work on it, and I think we're doing great. What our planning issues are today. So anything more for Bill on 109? I know it's probably.
Just one quick.
Yeah.
I think about Ronald Park, see what you know with how many houses. Built 19 at the back, and he can't build them fast enough for people moving in. Many people moving in, the seniors that lived in our community for years and years. For example, Bob Emerson, there's just, you turn around and they've sold their big houses now, want to move into a small place like that, they can afford it. A lot of it's rental, so they can put the money made from their house, they sold, and pay their rent on their interest and live in a comfortable place. Where I've been in them, they're beautiful inside there, just like an apartment. Not huge, I don't know how many square feet.
About 1150 to 1200 plus an attached garage. Yeah.
All right. Did I make this? Did I do the thing?
You did, and Bill reviewed it as well, so you just need to stay tuned and second
Okay,
it.
no, moved by Counselor Elliott, second by Counselor Thurston.
Bill did review it.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm gonna get had to change, you see, there's been so many times, but yes. We're live, so we're asking. Approved, all approved, yeah, that's approved. Okay. Next up, we have the,
Thanks, Bill.
thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Is that Bill?
That's mine.
Oh,
That's my
I thought Bill. It wasn't at all.
Yeah. That's my granddaughter.
Next up, we have, moved by Counselor Henson, second by Counselor Hudson. The county town manager received planning technician's report, line number 2022 and 042 for subdivision agreement for 2020-2001 next development. Further, the council considers passing file on regular session, authorize the mayor to sign and execute subdivision agreement. And actually, I'll turn it over to you. And further, council considers passing the bottom regular session to allocate 57 residential units of water and wastewater services for phase 1 of the subdivision. So, turn it over to Ashley. And just before you start, Ashley, this is what I was talking about. Like, if you look at this subdivision, that the owner developer here, this is what we were hoping when the developer came to us and talked about this. We talked about the need for this subdivision.
Thank you. So the subdivision agreement is for the next subdivision in Harrison here. Council will be familiar with it as it's come before you for a zoning bylaw amendment, official plan amendment, draft plan, and pre-servicing for water and sanitary. So now we're at the stage where all the draft conditions have been addressed and we're bringing forward the subdivision agreement for phase 1. So the subdivision will be called Maitland Meadows. It is 126 residential dwelling units with 57 singles, 30 semis, and 39 townhouse units. There's also open space, a stormwater management block, a future development block, 2 park blocks, and space allocated for walkway and roads. The subdivision is proposed to be split into phase 1 and phase 2, with 57 units in phase 1 to be built and a maximum build-up period of 5 years. That's not to say that the developer couldn't complete it quicker than the 5 years. For instance, Creek Bank, they proposed 5 years and they finished phase 1 in a year and a half. What's a little unique to this one is, as council's aware, Harrison currently does have sufficient water supply, but with the volume of proposed development, we will not within the next 5 years. So we've sought a solution that's proactive. It's not different than our neighboring municipalities who are also in the same situation. So for larger residential developments, we will be bringing allocation units through a bylaw to council for their consideration. So you have a certain amount of units for a certain amount of time. If you don't use it in that time, you have to come back before council. So right now we're allocating 57 units for phase 1. For phase 2, when it's closer to construction time, it'll come back before it as well. So subdivision agreement was circulated to all the commenting agencies, so town staff, county staff, Triton, Maitland Valley Source Water Protection, and there are no further comments or concerns raised, so we're satisfied, recommending that council endorse the subdivision agreement and let the mayor and clerk sign it.
Yeah, I got to get synced. I just had a question about the 57 units. I mean, I think it's great, it's fantastic, but I'm just wondering if there's a reason why there aren't some of the perhaps less expensive housing. First place. And why you know what I mean? Like, we're taking the 57 houses out of that subdivision, and they're going to be the most expensive houses in the subdivision, probably, unless time changes that. But I'm just thinking, we're looking for less expensive housing in fees. So was there any thought given to doing either the semis, some of the semis, or some of the townhouses?
So, yeah, I can speak to it. So it's not town staff that proposes where the phasing lines are. As you see up on the screen there, phase 2 is the rear half. In the darker orangish color, I'm not colorblind, tell me the wrong color, are a bunch of semis. So there are semis in there. A lot of times development phasing is based on how you want to construct the development. It's a lot easier building in the back and then moving the construction zone forward, opposed to trying to rip construction equipment through occupied dwelling streets. So there is some rationale from a practical standpoint in behind that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can speak to that too, if you like, and then, are we not talking about 67 minutes?
It was always 57.
Good. No, it's, yeah. All right, yeah, like Jerry said, the most of our cost is at the back where the stormwater management pond is. So that's where the big pipes are, and that's where everything has to outlet to. Plus, when we started this, to propose townhomes in Harrison is a scary thing for us, right? Like who, probably 3-4 years ago, who would have thought that people were gonna file those, right? So that's part of it too, is the, hope this catches on and it gets sold, right? 'Cause I still see a lot of people wanting single family homes, right?
Yeah, well, there's demand for housing for sure. I mean, this is great. I agree with that. It's been really, really good for us for sure.
Similar to the development in Palmerston, if you remember around Good Street, they did all the single families first, and then they built in the middle, because that's sort of, a developer has to make enough profit back to get going.
Absolutely, yes, for sure.
Anyway, so that's sort of what it is. But, and as far as the allotment, Terry, like that, I mean, that's where we're allotting right now. If things go fast or whatever, then you just come back in more lot.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason for the allocation is, so the builder has sufficient security that he can go ahead and build out that phase, opposed to, if we're giving one at a time and suddenly we've got someone on the other side of town builds twice as quick, and now suddenly he's halfway through phase 1 and sorry, you gotta shut her down. It's just a guarantee for the developer.
Just want to say, with this agreement, this was one of the first large subdivision agreements that staff had put together, and staff did a phenomenal job putting this together with Jerry and his team's help. This was turned around very, very quickly, and Terry and his group did an amazing job putting this together quickly and getting through everything, and staff commenting in very tight timeframes. And the lawyers did comment back that this was one of the best agreements they've seen in a long, long time. So pretty good for staff's first crack. And I just want to say, shout out to the staff and how well they did and got it through quickly to help move this along. So.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to where Bill was talking about. Minto has been a place open for business now, and I know Jerry was working through his first big one too. So there was lots of back and forth and whatever, and the cooperation was there as best we could, and I think this is a great part.
I don't think we would have tried it anywhere else.
Thanks for that, Jerry. That's important.
That's big.
But we have been, we were known to be open for business, and I know other communities that they you had to throw roadblocks up, and if you make it through all of them, I guess you get your house.
Yeah, but yeah, it would have been. Somewhere else.
Yeah, so appreciate everybody's work on it. Thanks for that, Chris, because I know we put a few meetings on it. We had lots of discussion over the period of time, and I think we got a great product and a great opportunity to get rolling. Okay, all in favor? As approved. Thank you. Never later on. we'll do that. All right, okay. William Street surplus land sale, or selling land. Oh, houses selling land. Let's move that over to Terry.
That would be, yes, that'd be me. So as council will recall, back on May 17th, sorry, brought forward a report to council to declare this parcel as surplus to the needs of the town. Since then, and as per our disposition of land bylaw, the intent to dispose of land was advertised as required for 2 weeks. Since that time, no other expressions of interest or offer have been received by the town. As per the letter of intent, the purchase is an as is, where is type of purchase. So they're taking on all the responsibility and liability of the property. The purchase price that was offered in there was 40,000 minus any environmental remediation costs, being that it was a former rail land, with a low end of 10,000. The prospective purchaser did provide us a engineered estimate on the remediation costs, so removal, disposal of soil, and replacing the soil. And for our little triangular portion, it came back at 72,000. So as such, and as per the letter of intent, the actual price that we would be paying the town would be $10,000. So the agreement of purchase and sale has been attached, drafted and attached to my report. And if there's any other questions, I would be happy to take them.
Questions?
So what's going to happen with that property? Usually when we surplus and sell, we have to do kind of know what's going to happen with that property. You can't build a house on it.
So you cannot build a detached house, so that's why it served no purpose for the town or us selling it to an individual. In my report, there's 2 lots identified there, lot 10 and lot 11. So lot 11 is ours. The prospective purchaser owns part 10. So there's potential, instead of them building a semi on lot 10, they could do a triplex across lot 11. They don't have to worry about setbacks and a bunch of different things. So it's, yeah.
Does that automatically become part of that lot 10 and lot 11, or I have to ask for?
I did not put in the agreement of purchase and sale to merge it, as there is the potential that the purchaser of lot 11 could approach the individual in behind them and maybe come up with some sort of a deal to enlarge that triangular portion to make it a billable one. So I just didn't want to shoehorn them into one direction and one direction only.
So they won't have to come back to council if they decide, unless they're gonna square a property off.
Yeah, then they would have to come back through the county for a consent application.
So the no triplex, they would have to come back.
They would not go.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Terry, the purchase and sale, is it binding the owner into doing the assessment and cleaning up the land, or can he settle?
There is no build-out clause for it. As if he takes title as a separate parcel, it's not buildable the way it stands. So it would have to be incorporated into a larger type development, or other things would have to happen. The agreement, Osmond does have clauses in there that, you know, they've got due diligence about soil conditions and stuff like that, and you're buying it, as I mentioned, as is, where it is. So any environmental issues on the property would become their responsibility. The reason why I spoke to the prospective owner about that right of purchaser from day one is I can't foresee that the town would want to incur a much higher cost to remediate the property to sell a clean property for less value than it is to clean it up. And as you can see with the engineer's report, that would be exactly the case. So, yeah.
No, I think it's a great marriage. It's a perfect situation.
second by Councilor Elliott. Council Town Minto receives the report building 2022-03 regarding park lot 11 William Street for information. Further considers the bylaw of possession authorized parent for execute agreement for sale of 2361693 Ontario. And now we got the joint compliance audit committee. I'll turn that over. This is one of those perfect things clerks love to bring.
Super
Super
excited
important
for it.
stuff for the clerks.
It is.
Go ahead.
It really is a housekeeping item. This is something that has to be done as part of the Municipal Election Act, that we must establish the committee prior to October 1st of each election year. So a little bit of background. For the last election, we had 4 members appointed, and the county clerks together had 1 audit committee, and that worked quite well. We are looking to do the same thing again, appointing the same 4 previous members, and having the audit committee as a joint committee. So what I'm looking for is that you accept the report, that you accept the terms of reference for a joint audit committee as attached for the 2022-2026 term of council, that you consider bylaw of concession to establish the joint compliance audit committee for the 2022-2026 term of council, and that council considers a bylaw of concession to appoint the members to the joint compliance audit committee for the 2022-2026.
That's the first and second
If
council.
you want to say that, please.
And then you just read it, so that's good. Anybody in expression? It's not. All in favor? Okay, that's very good, and I'll turn it over to Councilor Thurston. She can mess up rather than me. Go ahead. No.
Thank you, Mayor Rich. So we have a municipal drain. We have one item on the agenda, is municipal drain maintenance assessment, and Treasurer Duffy is going to take us through that.
Thank you. So, yeah, put away my computer and picked up the hard hat for tonight. And this is one of our smaller drain assessments. That's the map showing, I think on the 3rd page here. It's up on School Road 7 by the 7th line, and actually it was a beaver dam that was repaired some of the damage. Total assessment is only a net of $1,800. Town shares about 170 assessments. And it still has the same legislation.
Thank you, Treasurer Duff. Are there any questions?
I just wonder if we can assess the beavers.
I don't know if we can assess.
You probably help.
I know, beaver dam and little house for tax sale.
Yeah.
Yeah, read the recommendation, moved by Councilor Gusson and seconded by Deputy Mayor Turton, that the council of the town of Minto receives the report of Public Works 2022-022 regarding municipal drain maintenance assessment and considers passage of the related assessment bylaw in open session. Last chance for questions. All in favor? Carries, thank you, and I'll pass the chair back to Mayor Rich.
Thanks. Excellent job. Okay, we have other businesses disclosed, and go ahead, Ron. You're gonna start the Lions.
25th of this month, the Lions are hosting Party Park.
That'd be this Saturday.
Yes. Thank you. And same deal, we have 2 local bands this year. We're a family here, part of it, and Kara Smith. And the guitarist and the Thomas, and of course the boys are away. And we're looking forward to a fantastic time. It's the first time we've been back in 2 years, as everyone else is. So we're excited about having people outside, and like I said, it's down the park. It happens to rain, which it usually doesn't. We roll over there. We have each other's spot. We'll shoot on, we'll have that figured out by the morning. anyhow, welcome to that. That same day, we're having a rail fest.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, I'll let you do that.
Yeah.
I didn't want them to kick me for not supporting that.
No, I love
That's all I have.
it. Thanks, Judy, you had.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of OFA press releases lately that are of interest, I think. The first one is outlining the impacts of farmers as price takers in these times. I guess farmers are always price takers, but on top of groceries and fuels, farmers are experiencing a major increase in the cost of input supplies. And so that's impacting the pressure on farm businesses, but also stress levels and overall mental health for the farming community. These increased costs, of course, have a ripple effect through the food supply chain. And so we've all noticed that, of course, in the grocery stores. A lot of farm products are sold as commodities on international markets, though, and they're not even farmers that are have anything to do with setting those prices, and a lot of farmers are locked into contracts. So they've committed to selling the products at a certain price, so they can't really modify the cost of that product. And so, of course, we've got inflation and the global crisis and the rest, and interest rates, and all of these things kind of add up to a perfect storm. So one way that we can really help is that as consumers, that we purchase Ontario food as much as possible, and doing that supports farmers in our community and in the broader Ontario community, and will help build a stronger economy. There is a saying that if farmers are doing well, then the economy is doing well. And I think that is proven out to be true. The other thing is in the census, in the 2016 census, we may have seen this because it's been everywhere, I think. So in 2016, the census said that about 175 acres per day of prime farmland was being paved over for development. And that number has increased to 319 acres every single day in Ontario. And so we in this area, we're not contributing a whole lot to that, but that's the exact reason why we try to make things a little tighter in our towns. And so, I mean, we are doing that as much as we possibly can. 319 acres of land daily, that's the equivalent of losing 9 family farms every week. So it really has a huge ripple effect. So I just wanted to bring that to you. I'd be happy to send you the link for these news items if you would like them, but I just thought, we're in this period of big development, and it's great, and we all love it, but these are the reasons why we ask our developers and our builders and so on to tighten things up as much as we possibly can, because every house that we build has people that live in it, and they all want. It's a delicate balance. So I just want to bring that to your attention.
Or Judy, if you want to send the links to.
Sure, yeah.
That'd be all right.
Sure.
Thank you for that. Yeah. We're catch point to be more housing. But I'm wondering, I always never find out about getting best farming we ever had was down on Colorado all the way up to 404. Lost that years ago. My thing was, just follow up on what Ron's talking about, great Saturday happened. First of all, we had the farmer's market, which is strawberry social. I saw strawberries are out here now. Somebody actually slipped a strawberry in my salad at the county. I saw tomatoes and everything, and there was a scent. You can't put fruit in a salad. Anyway, it's against the rule. It's against the rules. Scott Wilson and I put a big thing up, and that never happened yet. Strawberries. Anyways, but strawberries are out, and they're strawberry social, so we go up to the market, and then when the market's over at 12, we tear down, and we start at 2 o'clock with our first rail fest. We should, but yeah, Ron, we've been working on it for 3 years to try to do this. And we have 8 breweries and 2 distilleries, 8 food trucks. It's gonna be a heck of a good time, lots of fun things for the kids and everything to do as well. So if you get a chance, come out there. and take an hour break, and go back to Ron's event. So I'm really looking forward to having a great event there. I was really pleased with the private park. We had over 300 people at that. I mean, the park getting used a lot. We had splash bash last week, last Saturday, and I don't know, I got in there, wanted just was flipping, giving the burgers out, the hot dogs out, get French fries, fed a whole commerce, I think. Yeah, yeah, and the high school, just before that, we did another 500 for the high school for their Walk for Life, and yeah, I'll tell you, one burgers cooked, best Lions Club, they'll cook burgers. You know how to do that. Anyways, all good stuff. And then I read the other day, and I'll have to get the link for you, which I'll send the link to everybody. But Wellington County was named one of the top 10 regions in Canada to live. And there's much criteria. It's affordability, it's safety, and all that stuff. But anyways, we were number 4 in Canada and number 2 in Ontario. Deep River, ourselves, and Barrie was 7th. Deep River was 1st. So there was some out in Nova Scotia and different places, but that's just a feather in our cap, and it talked about why people come to Wellington County. And as you said, Bill mentioned it earlier, we're one of the fastest growing regions as well, because a lot of people are coming from the city, coming towards us. And yeah, so just I'll get that link and send it out to you, and for Belinda to send it out, because it's great. Okay, anything else? Oh, Dave, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Member Rich. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knows that July 4th, Monday night, is the Chamber of Commerce annual summer party. And it's in Clifford this year, and everybody's invited.
Oh, and if you want to drop over to the Rail Fest, we need volunteers, so if anybody wants to come to work at the Rail Fest, we need some help with some of the events, sell tickets and other things. So I'll be there, and if you have your smart serve, you can even probably get right into the action. I do have smart serve, so I'll be right there serving maybe some of the beverages. Anyways, that's all good. So I have moved by Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Dirksen, the committee of the whole convenes in regular council. There was a motion. Moved by Councilor Anderson, by Councilor Dirksen, the council, the town may ratify the motion made in committee of the whole. All in favor? Carried. Bylaws. Okay. So this is something we're going to talk about, because I just thought of this at the county. If you don't know this, we don't read all the bylaws. I get 11 tonight. We just say from 1 to 11, don't we? Yeah, yeah. Can I say that tonight?
We can certainly look at that as.
Oh, there's something when we do that. I know that.
There's always
She's a stickler for rules.
I know. Something we should look into. Maybe we
Absolutely.
need a bylaw to do that.
I will look into that change for our procedure bylaw.
Good, okay. I'll propose that. Move by Deputy Mayor Jordan. And second by Councilor Elliott, the bylaw number 2021-75 provide the drainage works in the town of Minto known as municipal drain number 69, 2021. Be read first, read third time, and passed over to Council of Seal Corporation. All in favor? That is carried. Moved by Councilor Dirksen, second by Councilor Anderson, bylaw number 2022-59 authorize the mayor clerk to execute a consulting engineering service agreement between the corporation and town of Minto Triton Engineering Services Limited be approved, read first, second, third time, and passed on the Council of Civil Corporation. All in favor? That's carried. Moved by Councilor Johnson, second by Deputy Mayor Turner, bylaw number 2022-60 to establish a joint municipal election compliance audit committee be approved and read first, second, and third time, and passed on the Council of Civil Corporation. All in favor? That's carried. Moved by Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Dirksen, that the bylaw number 2022-61 to appoint members of the Wellington County Joint Municipal Election Compliance Audit Committee be approved, read first, second, and third time, and passed on the Council of Civil Corporation. All in favor? Moved by Councilor Anderson, second by Councilor Guston, that the bylaw number 2022-62 to authorize a subdivision agreement with Max Development Inc. with respect to land situated in the urban center in the former town of Harrison be approved, read first, second, third time, and passed on the Council of Civil Corporation. All in favor? That's carried. Moved by Deputy Mayor Turk, second by Council Elliott, the bylaw number 2022-63 to authorize the water wastewater allocations to Metz Development Inc. with respect to land situated in the urban center, former town of Harrison be approved, read first, second, third time, and passed on to council and sealed with the corporation. All in favor? That's carried. Moved by Council Dirksen, second by Council Anderson, that bylaw number 2022-64 to delegate authority with respect to the approval of the site plans within the town may be approved and read first, second, third time, passed on to council, seal with the corporation. All in favor? Okay. Moved by Council Johnson and second by Deputy Mayor Turk, the bylaw number 2022-65 being a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw number 0186 be amended affecting all lands in town may be approved, read first, second, third time, passed on council and sealed with the corporation. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Thurston, that the bylaw number 2022-66 to authorize the sale of a part lot 11 W/S William Street, Palmerston to 2361693 Ontario Inc. be approved, read first, second, third time, passed on the council, so the corporation. All in favor? Moving Councilor Anderson, sent by Councilor Johnson, the bylaw number 2022-67 to levy assessments for drain 25 that was repaired or maintained under section 74 of the Drainage Act for 2022 be approved, read first, second, third time, and passed open council and sealed receipt of the corporation. All in favor? That's carried. Moved by Deputy Mayor Turk, second by Councilor Elliott, the bylaw number 2022-60 to confirm the actions of the council of the corporation of town Minto with respect to the meeting held June 21st, 2022, be approved and read first, second, third time, and passed on the council of the corporation. All in favor? Favorite one. Moved by Council Dirksen, second by Council Anderson, council of town Minto adjourns to meet again, all the mayor. All in favor? Thanks for a good meeting, everybody.